The day my own son tried to bury me, alive in debt. Opening and hook. Blood is supposed to be thicker than water. But what happens when your own blood treats you like a business transaction? That was the thought pounding in my head the night my son and his wife stood in front of me, faces glowing with triumph, and told me to pack my things. "Mom," my son Daniel said with that stiff smile he wore when he thought he was being rational, "we don't need your little pension checks anymore. We've won real money. You should move on with your life. Somewhere else." And then his wife, Victoria, always perfectly manicured, always calculating, leaned closer and whispered like she was sharing a joke. "Go die somewhere else, Margaret. Preferably far away." They thought they had won $53 million. They thought the ticket was theirs. But what they didn't realize, what made me laugh in that moment, was that the ticket, the fortune, the power, was all in my name. Before I tell you how we reached that delicious moment of justice, let me take you back to the beginning. Because betrayal like this never happens overnight. It grows slowly, like mold in the corners of a once beautiful home. Call to action. Before we dive deeper into today's dramatic story, don't forget to subscribe to Quiet Revenge Tales and ring the notification bell. Here you'll always find stories of sacrifice, betrayal, and the unexpected twists that turn weakness into strength. Where are you watching from today? Drop a comment below. Who knows, the next story might echo your own life. Setup: My life before the storm. My name is Margaret Lewis. I'm 67 years old, a widow of 2 years, and until recently I thought my greatest joy was living close to my only surviving child. I grew up in Cedar Falls, Iowa. If you've ever lived in a small Midwestern town, you know the rhythm. Quiet streets dusted with snow in December, the same faces in the grocery store, everyone knowing everyone's business. For me, it was comforting. After my husband Richard passed, I told myself being close to family would keep the loneliness away. That's how I ended up moving into Daniel and Victoria's grand colonial house, a place with more marble countertops and glossy photographs on the walls than warmth in the air. They told me I'd have the guest room, but very quickly, that guest room became something else. Victoria had a way of turning every kindness into a transaction. Within a month, she was sliding household expense spreadsheets across the kitchen table, highlighting my contribution. The numbers were clear: $1,300 a month, just $50 less than my entire Social Security check. I remember staring at the paper, my hands trembling slightly. "This seems high," I said softly. Victoria flashed that corporate smile of hers. "It's only fair, Margaret. You use the kitchen, the utilities, and don't forget when the us grandkids visit. You're here too. It all adds up." Daniel didn't meet my eyes. He never did when things got uncomfortable. I signed. What choice did I have? Finding another place at my age on my income was nearly impossible, so I signed away my dignity in neat black ink. The weight of sacrifice. The days blurred into each other. I cooked most of the meals, folded endless laundry, picked up dry cleaning, and babysat Emma and Josh every other weekend while Daniel and Victoria escaped to resorts or dinner parties. At first, I told myself it was temporary, that grief had made me vulnerable, that family pulled together during hard times. But then came the dinner party. The night I stood in the kitchen with a tray of empty glasses and overheard Victoria laughing with her friend. "It's perfect," she said. "Margaret does all the housework, watches the kids, and her pension basically pays for itself. It's like having live-in help, except she pays us for the privilege." Her friend laughed, clinking glasses. I stood there frozen, shame and fury burning in my chest. Do you know that moment when the air feels so heavy you can hardly breathe? That was me. If you've ever heard your own sacrifices dismissed as nothing, if you've ever been made invisible in your own family, you know exactly how it feels. A seed of doubt. That night, I sat by the window of the so-called guest room, staring at the snow falling against the streetlights. I could almost hear Richard's voice, steady and calm. "Margaret, when people show you who they are, believe them." I wanted to believe my son was different, but slowly doubt sank its claws in. Then came the basement plan. One Sunday morning, Victoria spread glossy architectural drawings across the dining table. "You'll love this, Margaret," she said, tapping the paper with her perfect nails. "A private suite in the basement, your own kitchenette, your own entrance. More independence, more independence." What she meant was isolation, a way to keep me out of sight, like a burden to be tucked away. I asked quietly, "And if I don't want to move to the basement?" Her smile tightened. "Then maybe it's time you considered other options." Daniel finally looked at me, shifting in his chair. "Mom, we'll understand if you want to find another place." Another place? At my age. With $50 left each month after their so-called expenses, they had me trapped, and they knew it. Mini cliffhanger. But sometimes the universe takes its time preparing justice. That same week, I walked through the snow to Murphy's Corner store, just like I had every Friday for 32 years, and bought my lottery ticket. The same numbers Richard and I had played since 1992. I didn't know it yet, but that little slip of paper in my purse was about to become the weapon that would change everything. If you were in my shoes, watching your own family bleed you dry while smiling to your face, what would you have done? The mask slips. When love turns into exploitation, the first cracks. The winter deepened, and with it, so did the cracks in my relationship with Daniel and Victoria. On the surface, they were a picture-perfect couple. Smiling family photos on holiday cards, carefully curated Instagram posts of ski trips and wine tastings. To neighbors, they were the successful family. But inside those polished walls, I was slowly being erased. The requests never stopped. "Mom, can you pick up the kids? We're running late." "Margaret, the cleaning service canceled. Could you handle the guest bathroom?" Every task was dressed up as if I were part of the team, part of the household. But the truth was harsher. I had become live-in staff, staff who paid rent. If you've ever lived in someone else's house but felt like an outsider, you know the quiet humiliation I carried every single day. The dinner party. The breaking point began at one of Victoria's glittering soirees. She loved hosting, filling the house with people who admired her taste in wine and furniture. That night, I'd spent hours preparing hors d'oeuvres, polishing glasses, scrubbing counters until they gleamed. As the guests laughed in the living room, I hovered nearby with a tray. That's when I overheard it. Jennifer, one of Victoria's friends, asked playfully, "How do you manage with your mother-in-law living here all the time?" "Doesn't it get crowded?" Victoria smirked, swirling her glass of Chardonnay. "Oh, it's actually perfect. Margaret covers her own expenses. She even pays us more than enough to make it worthwhile. And she cooks, cleans, babysits. It's like having live-in help, except she pays us for the privilege." The room erupted in laughter. Jennifer clapped her hands, teasing, "You should write a book, How to Monetize Your Mother-in-Law." I stood frozen in the hallway, my tray trembling. In that moment, I wasn't a mother, a widow, or even a human being. I was a punchline. Tell me, if it were you, would your heart not break? Would anger not rise so sharp you could taste it in your throat? The basement sentence. Not long after that party came the so-called upgrade. One afternoon, Victoria spread blueprints across the table like she was revealing a surprise vacation. "Margaret, we've decided to build you a private suite in the basement. You'll have your own kitchenette and entrance. So much independence." Independence. Such a pretty word for exile. I looked at my son. His eyes darted away, shame flickering but quickly smothered. "And if I don't want to move downstairs?" I asked. Victoria's lips tightened into that smile that never reached her eyes. "Then perhaps it's time to think about alternatives. We all need our space. Mom, Daniel added gently, we'll understand if you want to explore other options. Other options? As if I had any. With just $50 left each month, what options could there be besides poverty or dependency? That night, I lay awake in the upstairs room I had once called mine, staring at the ceiling, Richard's words echoing in my head. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. Betrayal in numbers. It wasn't just the words. It was the math of it all. $1,300 each month gone. My entire Social Security swallowed. In return, childcare hours that stacked up like bricks, loads of laundry that left my hands raw, meals that disappeared without gratitude. I started keeping a notebook, old habit from my days as a secretary, dates, hours, tasks. Not because I planned revenge, not yet, but because I needed to see in black and white what my life had become. 1,200 hours of unpaid childcare in a year, 800 loads of laundry, 300 meals, and $15,600 in so-called expenses. Do you see the pattern? Exploitation, disguised as family. The lottery draw. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Friday in December. I'd walked through icy streets to Murphy's Corner store, bought my ticket with the same numbers I'd played for 32 years, numbers tied to birthdays, anniversaries, and the house Richard and I once owned. At 10:59 p.m., the winning numbers flashed across the television: 7, 14, 23, 31, 45, Powerball 18. I froze, the book sliding from my lap. Those were my numbers, my numbers. I fumbled for my purse, my hands trembling, and pulled out the slip of paper, the exact match, $53 million. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. 32 years of prayers answered in an instant. I thought of running downstairs, of telling Daniel and Victoria, of sharing the joy with family. But then I remembered the basement plans, the spreadsheets, the laughter behind my back. Number. Not this time. I slipped the ticket back into my wallet, right beside Richard's old driver's license, and whispered to the night sky, "Thank you, Discovery." The next morning began as always. Chaos. Kids arguing over cartoons, Daniel glued to his laptop, Victoria heading out to yoga. She stopped by the kitchen, rifling through my purse for the grocery coupons I had clipped. And that's when she found it. Her voice sliced through the room. "Margaret, what is this?" I turned. She was holding the lottery ticket, her face pale, her hands shaking. Daniel appeared instantly, alarmed. "What's wrong?" Victoria shoved the ticket at him. "The winning numbers. Look, it's hers." The kitchen fell silent, the air crackling. Daniel's eyes widened as he compared the numbers on his phone. Then he looked at me, disbelief etched into every line of his face. "Mom, do you realize what this means?" Of course I did. The only question was, did they? Mini cliffhanger. For the next hour, they buzzed with excitement, calling friends, dreaming aloud about bigger houses, exotic vacations, upgrades to the basement plan, and while I sat at the table, the owner of the golden ticket, watching them build castles in the air. They hadn't yet asked the most important question. Whose name was on the ticket? If you were me, sitting there with $53 million in your wallet while your own children plotted your exile, would you have told them right away or waited for the perfect moment? The quiet power of truth. The illusion of control. By noon that Saturday, the house was buzzing like a stock exchange floor. Victoria had her phone glued to her ear, pacing the kitchen, whispering into the receiver, "Yes, $53 million, we won. Of course we're upgrading. Maybe even a new house." Her voice sparkled with triumph. Daniel stood at the counter, staring at the ticket like it was a sacred artifact. He kept muttering, "This is real. This is actually real. And me?" I sat quietly at the kitchen table, sipping tea, watching. For years, I'd been their invisible maid, their unpaid nanny. But in that moment, I held all the power, tucked neatly inside my wallet. It was almost funny how they didn't even think to ask. They just assumed that anything in my possession belonged to them, assumed that my life, my choices, my dignity were theirs to control. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been treated as if your worth had expired, you know exactly how satisfying it was to let them stew in their own arrogance. Plans. Without me. Daniel, Victoria said breathlessly, we should call the contractor. No more cutting corners. If we're millionaires, we can afford marble countertops for the basement suite. I raised an eyebrow. Even in her fantasy, I was still being banished underground. Daniel nodded eagerly. Or maybe we look at those luxury senior communities. You know, the ones with activities, medical staff, everything. Mom, wouldn't that be perfect? You'd be with people your own age, and we'd have space to expand. He smiled at me like he was offering a gift to ship me away. I glanced down at my cup, hiding the laugh bubbling in my chest. They really thought I'd be the one isolated, powerless, the reveal. Finally, when their chatter reached fever pitch, I set down my cup. There's just one detail you seem to be forgetting, I said quietly. They both stopped mid-sentence, blinking at me. The lottery ticket, I continued, is in my name. The silence that followed wasn't like before. This wasn't shocked joy. This was horror. Victoria's face drained of color. Daniel's hand slackened, the ticket slipping back onto the counter. What do you mean? Victoria asked slowly. I extended my hand. After a pause, Daniel placed the ticket back in my palm. I mean, I said, steadying my voice, that I bought this ticket with my money, using the same numbers I've played for 32 years, which makes it mine. The cracks in their armor. Victoria's face flickered through shades of red like a warning light. But you live here. We're family. That money changes everything for all of us. I stood taller than I had felt in years. No, it changes everything for me. The look on their faces, realizing that their golden goose had wings of her own, was something I knew I'd treasure forever. Daniel tried to recover. Mom, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Yes, technically it's in your name, but we're family. We share things. We support each other. I nearly laughed. Support? Like charging me $1,300 a month to live in a guest room? Like plotting to move me into a basement? Like mocking me at dinner parties? Support each other? I said sweetly. Then I suppose you won't mind if I stop contributing to household expenses immediately, since I'm family and not a tenant. Their desperation. That night, Victoria came armed with a 3-ring binder, pages of statistics highlighted in neon yellow. Margaret, did you know 70% of lottery winners go bankrupt within 5 years? Poor financial decisions, bad investments, greedy relatives. It's terrifying. Her voice dripped with concern, but her eyes gleamed with hunger. That's why you need professional guidance, she continued smoothly. Family guidance. We'll protect you, Daniel chimed in. Mom, Ashley's right. This is way too big for one person, especially someone your age, someone my age. In their eyes, I was too old, too naive, too weak to manage my own fortune. But they had no idea. The notebook I reached for the small spiral notebook I'd been keeping. Flipping it open, I read aloud. Over the past year, I've paid you $15,600 in household expenses. I've provided 1,200 hours of unpaid childcare, 800 loads of laundry, 300 meals, and in return, you offered me a guest room you planned to move into the basement. Their faces went rigid, panic bleeding into shock. That's not fair, Daniel sputtered. We've provided you with a home. No, I corrected calmly. You've provided me with room and board in exchange for money and labor that exceeded what you gave me by at least $20,000. That's not generosity. That's exploitation." The word hung in the air like smoke. A new dawn. The next morning, when reporters swarmed the front yard, microphones thrust toward the door, I realized the story was no longer just mine. Victoria tried to bask in the spotlight, hair perfectly styled, telling them, "As her family, we're all so excited for this blessing in our lives." But when I stepped outside, the cameras turned toward me. "I'm grateful for this gift," I told the reporters, "and I plan to use it to live independently and make my own choices for the first time in years." "Are you saying your family took advantage of you?" one asked. I looked straight into the lens. "I'm saying family should be about love and respect, not business arrangements, and it's never too late to stand up for yourself." Behind me, I could hear Victoria's sharp intake of breath, but I didn't look back. Mini cliffhanger. That was only the beginning, because what Daniel and Victoria didn't know was that Richard, my late husband, had left me one last gift, one more secret they could never have imagined. And when I revealed it, their world would crumble. If you were standing in my shoes, would you tell them now? Or would you wait until the perfect moment when their arrogance blinded them completely? The reckoning begins. The lawyer's revelation. By Monday afternoon, the story had already swept through Cedar Falls. Reporters camped outside. Neighbors whispered. Even people I hadn't spoken to in decades suddenly remembered my phone number. But instead of hiding, I drove straight to David Richardson's office, the lawyer who had handled Richard's estate. David rose from behind his mahogany desk, his smile warm. "Congratulations, Margaret." Richard would be proud hearing his name sent a wave of comfort through me. But then David grew serious. "There's something your husband asked me to keep until the day it was needed." "Margaret, that day is today." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" David slid a thick folder across the desk. 6 months before his death, Richard hired a private investigator. He suspected Daniel and Victoria were living beyond their means. He feared they would exploit you. I flipped through the papers. Credit card debt stacked high, a mortgage underwater, Victoria's boutique business, bleeding losses. David continued. Richard also set aside a $500,000 insurance policy. It's been sitting in trust for you, untouched, waiting for the moment you might need protection. Tears stung my eyes. Richard had seen the storm coming, and even from the grave, he had built me a lifeboat. A plan forms. As I drove home, the folder lay heavy on the passenger seat, like a shield forged from my husband's love. I thought of Daniel and Victoria, scheming, calculating, believing they could cage me. They had no idea that the cage door had already been unlocked by Richard's foresight, by my lottery ticket, by my own quiet resolve. By evening, my decision was clear. It was time for a family meeting. The family meeting. At 7 o'clock sharp, Daniel and Victoria entered the living room. Victoria carried her laptop, brimming with financial strategies. Daniel brought a bottle of wine, his peace-offering smile plastered on. "Mom," he began, "about what you said to those reporters. We understand you were overwhelmed, but we can work through this together." Victoria opened her laptop with a practiced flourish. "We've prepared a comprehensive plan for your finances. Trusts, investments, everything to keep you secure." I listened quietly. Then I placed Richard's folder on the coffee table. "Before we talk about my financial security," I said, "let's discuss yours." The documents. Daniel leaned forward, curiosity flickering into dread as he scanned the first page. His face paled. "What is this?" Victoria asked, though her voice trembled. "A complete financial profile of your household," I replied, "compiled by a private investigator your father hired before he died." Daniel's hand shook as he flipped through the pages. "Dad hired someone to spy on us?" "To protect me," I said evenly. "He knew what you were capable of." I laid out the evidence one sheet at a time. $47,000 in credit card debt across 6 accounts, a mortgage underwater by $32,000, 2 car loans totaling $18,000, Victoria's business operating at a loss for 8 consecutive months, Victoria's professional facade cracked. How dare you invade our privacy? The same way you invaded mine, I countered, by deciding I was too incompetent to manage my own affairs, by charging me rent that swallowed my entire pension. By plotting to bury me in your basement? The room was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking on the mantel. The unraveling Daniel tried one last time. Mom, everyone has financial struggles. We just needed help. Your family, don't you understand? Family? I said softly. Family doesn't drain their mother's social security while mocking her as live-in help. Family doesn't laugh about monetizing her suffering at dinner parties. Family doesn't plan her exile. I placed one final document on the table. And family doesn't need to know about the $500,000 trust your father left me, which has been quietly waiting for this very day. Victoria gasped. Daniel's jaw dropped. Yes, I said, voice steady. Richard prepared for this. He knew you would come for me, and he made sure I would never be defenseless, their panic. Victoria's tears came fast, but they weren't tears of sorrow. They were the desperate kind, the kind that fall when someone realizes their mask has shattered. You can't just walk away, she cried, not after everything we've done for you. Everything you've done? I repeated. Like taking $50,000 from me over 2 years? Like stripping me of dignity one spreadsheet at a time? Daniel's voice broke. Mom, please. We thought. No, I cut in. You didn't think. You assumed. You assumed I would be too weak to fight back, too old to notice, too desperate to resist. But you were wrong, drawing the line. I rose to my feet, the folder in hand. For the first time in years, I felt taller than my son. I've already put down a deposit on a new apartment, I said, a place where I'll live on my own terms. And when I move out, your debts will still be yours to carry. Victoria's sobs grew louder. Daniel pressed his hands to his temples. Mom, don't do this, he pleaded. I'm not doing this, I said quietly. You did. Every time you saw me as a burden instead of a blessing, every time you chose greed over gratitude, you did this. Mini cliffhanger, I picked up my purse and walked to the door. Behind me, Victoria wailed, Daniel begged, but their voices sounded far away, like echoes in a house that no longer belonged to me. Because the truth was clear now. I had been their safety net, their silent bank, but no more. And tomorrow, when I signed the papers at the lottery office, the world would know not just that I was wealthy, but that I had finally reclaimed my freedom. If you were me, standing at that door with everything finally in your hands, would you look back one last time? Or would you walk out without a word? Justice with better timing, the final walkout. I can still hear the sound of my heels against the hardwood floor that night as I walked out of Daniel and Victoria's house for the last time. They stood frozen in the living room, Victoria's mascara streaking, Daniel's voice breaking, but I didn't turn back. I couldn't. Some doors must stay closed. When I stepped into the icy night air, it felt like I was breathing for the first time in years, claiming my freedom. The next morning, I drove to Des Moines with the lottery ticket tucked safely in my wallet, right beside Richard's driver's license. The lottery office was buzzing with cameras and reporters. Everyone wanted a glimpse of the mystery winner. When I handed over the ticket, the clerk's eyes widened. Ma'am, do you understand you've just secured $53 million? I nodded, calm, certain. Yes, and I know exactly what I'm going to do with it. For the first time, my life was mine, not theirs. Not dictated by debts, basements, or binders. Mine. The press conference. Later that afternoon, I stood before microphones and cameras. The press leaned forward, hungry for quotes. "What do you plan to do with the money, Mrs. Lewis?" one reporter asked. I smiled. "I plan to live independently." To make my own choices for the first time in years, another voice called out, "Is it true you've been living with your son's family?" I steadied my breath. This was the moment to speak not just for me, but for every invisible parent, every silent elder who had been exploited. "Yes," I said into the microphones. "I lived with them. I paid them $1,300 a month while cooking their meals, cleaning their home, and caring for their children. They even planned to move me to the basement because my presence in their lives had become inconvenient." Gasps rippled through the room. "Are you saying your family took advantage of you?" another reporter pressed. I met the cameras head on. "I'm saying family should be about love and respect, not business arrangements. And I'm saying it's never too late to stand up for yourself." Behind the flashing cameras, I imagined thousands of women watching from their living rooms, women who had given everything only to be cast aside. I hoped they felt a little less alone. The consequences. By the time I drove home, the story had exploded across 3 counties. Headlines read, "Mother exploited by son wins lottery and her freedom." Daniel and Victoria couldn't hide from the storm. Reporters swarmed their driveway, neighbors whispered behind closed curtains, and social media buzzed with outrage. Victoria tried to spin it, insisting to anyone who would listen it was all a misunderstanding. But the damage was done. Their polished image shattered, their debts looming larger without my pension to prop them up. The last confrontation. That evening, they tried one last time. "Mom," Daniel begged, over the phone, "don't let the media tear us apart. We're still family. That word had become sour in my mouth. You had 2 years to treat me like family," I said evenly. "You chose to treat me like an ATM. That was your decision. Now this," I looked at the thick lottery envelope on my desk, "is mine." There was silence. Then the line went dead. A new beginning. 2 weeks later, I moved into a bright apartment at Meadowbrook Senior Community. 2 bedrooms, a full kitchen, windows that flooded the space with light, a place I could finally call home. The monthly fee? Less than what I'd been paying to live as a tenant in my own son's house. I planted a pot of herbs on the balcony. Basil, thyme, rosemary. As the sun warmed my face, I felt Richard beside me, his voice gentle. Justice delayed isn't justice denied. It's justice with better timing. He had been right all along. Reflection and morale. Looking back now, I don't feel only anger. I feel clarity. Daniel and Victoria thought wealth would give them control. But what it revealed was the truth. Greed consumes itself. Money cannot buy love or respect or decency. Respect isn't given by blood. It's earned through kindness. And when kindness is exploited, justice will always find a way back. Talking to the audience. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever sacrificed everything only to be dismissed or mocked, you are not alone. And if you were in my shoes, standing at that kitchen table with the golden ticket in your hand, what would you have done? Would you forgive? Would you fight? Share your thoughts in the comments, because here on Quiet Revenge Tales, every story is a reminder none of us should suffer in silence. Closing call to action. If this story touched you, leave a comment or a message for yourself, something you wish you had heard years ago. And don't forget to subscribe to Quiet Revenge Tales for more stories of sacrifice, betrayal, and the twists of fate that restore justice. Because here, we believe in one truth. No one is too old, too weak, or too small to stand up for themselves.